to the Ed Morrissey Show. Today is Thursday, November 5th, 2015. Joining me as always on Thursday afternoons, very late on Thursday afternoons, Duane Generalissimo Patterson of the Show.
Dude, I'm not late. I was on time.
Dude,
I was seconds before I needed to be here.
Seconds. It's an amazing.
How much show prep did we do for today?
I think it was 15 seconds actually.
If that.
If that. So Duane Generalissimo Patterson of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
So what you're going to hear, everybody on the webs, everybody in the chat, all the chattises, what you're going to hear for the next 35 minutes is pretty much what Ed and I would be doing if we just picked up the phone and called each other, because we have not planned this out in any detail whatsoever. This is all spontaneous.
We do not do that often enough, by the way. Just pick up the phone. We got to do that more often, because
we say that about every other week.
We do that. We do say that about every other week. All right. So let's start with what happened on Tuesday night, because I know you and Hugh were watching the election returns very carefully. I was surprised to see Matt Bevin win by almost 9 percentage points in Kentucky.
You know, here's something that just crossed the interwebs. The polling wasn't right in Kentucky.
No.
All of the polling, I had when I do the after show, after Hugh's 3-hour show for the people on the universe, all the results had just started to come in and roll out when the after show was going on. And I had an internet stream of, I think it's WHAS, which is the ABC affiliate,
yep.
Channel 11 out of Louisville.
Yep.
And the faces of their decision desk, there are 4 political people. I don't know. I couldn't pull their 4 people out of a police lineup. Never seen them before. Probably never will again. But you can kind of tell where their personal ideologies lied, because all 4 of them, when they're reporting this, it's like somebody just dropped a house on their foot, because they all had the look in their face like, oh my God.
You mean the Bambi on the highway? You mean the Bambi on the highway look in their eyes?
Oh my stars! Did they look shell shocked? They're like, "This is historic. We haven't seen anything like this. Our polling didn't say this was going to happen." Allison Lundergan Grimes. Well, yeah, she won, but she damn near lost. She was supposed to win in a landslide. The governor, Bashir was like a legacy name here. And then one of the clowns comes on. I don't know who he is. I don't know if he purports himself to be neutral, or if he purports himself to be a partisan lefty. But they start analyzing why the Republicans had such a good night, and they conclude begrudgingly that Obamacare indeed was on the ballot in Kentucky, and Obamacare Kentucky state version, which I believe is called Connect, is a miserable failure. It costs too much money. It's going up everywhere. It's got the same death spiral problems that every other state in the union has.
Well, especially the co-ops. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on, but especially the co-ops.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In fact, the state exchanges are up to something like around a 50% fail rate between all the states that have said, well, we really wanted to do the state-run thing, and it's really not working out too well, so we're just going to quit doing it and dump everybody in the federal exchange.
Right.
It's a nightmare where it is a colossal failure. It's everything that we said Obamacare would be and less. And apparently, if you look all over Kentucky, all of the inner cities that they thought were going to save the day yet again for the Democratic Party, they just didn't get out and vote in large numbers. And all over the state, the whole state was red except for the inner city, Louisville and a little bit in Frankfort.
Right.
There's not a lot of blue left in Kentucky.
No, this is the thing that you see in off-year elections, right? It's a lower turnout, generally speaking, so get out the vote tends to make more of a difference.
Correct.
And what we're seeing over the last several years is that Republicans are doing really well in those types of elections. Now, the question is how do you translate that into a presidential election? And I wish somebody would write a book about that.
Oh, wait.
Oh, wait.
There is a book coming out.
There is a book coming out about that, actually. Golly.
The the bald swami of the Twin Cities is coming out with a new book, isn't he? That deals with that very subject.
He is indeed. He is indeed. And but I mean, it's interesting to see this play out because this is what I was researching all summer is how this plays out on the ground level and what works and what doesn't work. And it's very clear that Republicans at the state and local level are in touch with the voters and understand what the voters are doing. And it's almost the opposite problem that you see in presidential elections. Republicans get on the ground and work with voters while Democrats are trying to do this, 15,000-foot messaging thing, and it doesn't work. And the problem is reversed in presidential elections, at least it has been up until now, is that Republicans do the 15,000 or 30,000-foot thing, and Democrats are on it. Well, I take that back. Obama was on the ground. And I think the difference is that when Obama's not on the ticket, you don't have that organization that understands how to do that. And so it did not surprise me that the polling missed this for two reasons. One is that there weren't very many polls. I mean, let's face it. I think I went and looked at the, Real Clear Politics average when I set up the open thread for election night. And this was earlier in the day. And I think the last poll that RCP had was from June, right? And that was a PPP poll. And I'm thinking, that can't be right. I mean, RCP is usually all over these things. Well, there were a few other polls that were done, but they were all done by Survey USA for the Courier-Journal, I think, in Louisville. And they all said the same thing. They all said Jack Conway up by 5, Jack Conway up by 5, Jack Conway up by 5. I mean, it was like,
by the way, constant. Jack Conway, his acceptance speech.
His acceptance speech?
Well, it was kind of a morphed acceptance speech into we really won but we lost type of thing.
Yeah.
Didn't he make some Jesus reference and Bethlehem reference?
No, that wasn't Conway. That was Greg Stumbo, the Speaker of the Kentucky House. This was you actually have to watch this thing or listen to it.
I don't know all the cast of characters. I just know somebody down there made some concession speech that was really bizarre. It was
bizarre. Greg Stumbo is the guy's name. And yeah, he was talking about how, conservatives want to say that, if you're a Christian, you have to be a Republican. If you're a Republican, but that's not true. Mary didn't ride into Bethlehem on an elephant. She rode into Bethlehem on a donkey. Like, okay. That's interesting to know. And and then there was more. Jesus was a carpenter and he was a teacher. Two things that Democrats tend to be. It's like, yeah. Well, thank you very much for your biblical exegesis, Mr. Stumbo. But I think you need to go back to theological 101. It was a bizarre speech, and there was two people on stage, right, flanking him, two Democratic officials, and they had this kind of smile on their face, and their eyes were kind of going, where is he going with this? And then at the very end, Stumbo uses, I think, what had to be one of the worst analogies I ever heard to talk about. Next year we're going to have a horse, and it's not American Pharaoh, but it's what do you call it? Arkansas Traveler, and it's going to have a lady jockey on it. It's going to ride us to victory. And,
trying to say that Jesus didn't, or that in the Bible nobody ever rode an elephant in that was worth anything. That they only rode donkeys, so therefore if they rode donkeys, that means the Democrats are biblically preferred.
That's more coherent, I think, than what Stumbo was saying.
It's more coherent than Barack Obama's Syrian policy. That's for damn sure. Well, but we may get there later.
We may get to that because there's an interesting poll out about ISIS. But we'll
back to the results Tuesday night.
Yeah,
how great is it to see on the stage all smiles talking about how I'm the living embodiment that if you work hard enough, good things can happen to you and you can get ahead, says the first African-American statewide office holder in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and she happens to be a Republican.
Yes.
Janine Hampton.
Tea Party Republican.
A Tea Party Republican, the new incoming lieutenant governor of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. How great is that?
It's amazing. It's amazing for a couple of reasons. I mean, not so much because of the lieutenant governor, who is Matt Bevin's running mate, but the fact that Matt Bevin actually kind of picked up and came back for the gubernatorial race at all. You know, he wasn't necessarily a favorite of the party establishment in Kentucky. He tried to run against Mitch McConnell and got
he didn't exactly run the best campaign either, and there were a lot of low blows at him along the way. And in fact, in his acceptance speech, I thought he did a masterstroke of brilliance. And he said, "Look, I know to a lot of people out there that did not vote for me and that are seeing me as the incoming governor, I just want to let you know that, you know, there's two me's. There's the me that's in front of you talking now, and there's the me that you've been seeing on TV an awful lot, interrupting all your ball games, interrupting all your, interrupting Jeopardy, interrupting Wheel of Fortune. You've been seeing a really bad me a lot lately, and I'm here to tell you that starting tonight, I am officially ordering the bad me to never be on the airwaves again." Oh, it was a great bit of great bit of trolling, but also in a uniting type of way by saying, "Look, who you saw, that's not who got elected. I am me, and I'm here to tell you, the demon that the other side was trying to run against, that they created, you're going to learn fairly quickly that demon is not who the real me is. I'm here to tell you who the real me is." It was really pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it was a remarkable victory for Bevin, especially because of the fact that he kind of blew it against, I think he picked the wrong race the first time around anyway, to go up against Mitch McConnell. He picked the right race this time, although not too many people gave him... I mean, even on election day, people were saying, well he ran a decent race, but...
There's only been 2 Republicans, including Bevin, elected to the governor's mansion in Kentucky in the last 40 years.
Right. Well, it's sort of like Maryland, right? It's like Maryland. Maryland had only had 2, right? In the previous 40 years, and Larry Hogan won in Maryland. Now, Kentucky is a conservative state. Maryland is not a conservative state. So Kentucky Democrats are a different breed, really, than Democrats on the East Coast and Democrats on the West Coast. They tend to be more conservative.
True. However, that's one of the few hotbeds left that the Democratic Party has left in this country at the state level.
Yeah.
And the thing is, and that's what I want to get into, and that's what's so important about this thing. There's mostly good that comes out of that from where we're from our perspective, we being on the right side of the political spectrum. But
both the right and correct side, by the way. Both the right and correct side of the political spectrum.
Correct.
So, there you go. Okay.
And there's also one downside to it as well if you are applying it to the presidential campaign too, which hopefully we'll get to.
Yeah.
Which is the makeup now of state control, Republican versus Democrat amongst the 50 states. I think it's up to, 32-17 now, Republicans hold an advantage in state houses?
In governors.
I'm sorry, in governors it's
32-17 and 1. 32-17 and 1. Because Alaska.
That's remarkable, Ed. I mean, that's really remarkable.
It is.
That 32 of the 50 states are being run by Republicans.
Yes.
I don't ever remember the number being that high in my lifetime before.
I don't think it. I don't know if it's been. I don't believe it's ever been that high in my lifetime. I don't believe. Because
the best thing about this is what this does is it helps accentuate and exacerbate the age problem that the Democratic Party currently has. If you look at the Democratic Party, who the players are on the national level, it's basically, it's a scene out of Cocoon, right? All it's missing is the pool and the big eggs and rocks.
Right, yeah.
And the reason why is largely because of the blowout they had in 2010, the blowout they had in 2014, and not just at the federal level, But at the state level and the state houses level,
More so at the state.
more so at the state level, what's happening is the triple A's, the minor leagues, the triple A, double A, single A's, if you will, to make a bad metaphor or bad analogy. The Democrats, their bench is getting slaughtered. They're getting slaughtered left, right, and sideways.
Yes.
And to wit, at the national level, one of the 435 Republicans still running for president is Rand Paul, junior senator from Kentucky. Now,
right.
Rand Paul would not be my favorite candidate to get into this race, and I think the field would be much better without him. And in fact, if there's one thing you can say good about Donald Trump is that he has totally drunk Rand Paul's milkshake, at least when it comes to the libertarians and the populist wing of the party out there.
Yeah.
So Rand Paul has no oxygen. There's no real reason he's still in the race, but he is. One of his endorsements early on was a political payback because Mitch McConnell needed every favor he could, and Rand Paul pledged his support to Mitch McConnell for a price. The price was when Rand Paul would run for president, Mitch McConnell had to return the favor and endorse Rand Paul for president, which he has done because he's loyal and he kept his word.
Yep.
That said, now that Rand Paul is floundering and the GOP is facing a fairly steep map in 2016 at the Senate level, Mitch McConnell has kind of quietly gone to Rand Paul and said, now, buddy, I'm supporting you for president. I've said so publicly. I always will. But now that we're private here, get out.
Yeah.
Because we need the Senate seat, and there is no guarantee you're going to hold this Senate seat if you don't kind of quit dipping your toe into both pools here. Understand that it ain't happening. Trump is killing you. You're not getting any oxygen. It's not happening. Bail out now while you can save face, and go back to work and save your Senate seat, and we can do great things here in the Senate for the next couple of terms because we're going to hopefully hold the Senate.
Yeah, this is the Amityville Horror message, by the way.
Get
out.
Get out. So Mitch McConnell's trying to quietly tell him to get out. What made that message more complicated was how good of a night it was for the Republicans. One of the races statewide is state auditor. And in Kentucky, it's kind of a big deal to be auditor. It's not, compared to other states, it's kind of a show position. And to a degree it is that in Kentucky as well, although there is name ID that is associated with the state auditor down there.
Right.
The Democrats assumed, because Democrats have held every office in the state for 40 years, that here's what we're going to do. We've got this young upstart kid named Adam Elllen, and we're going to stick him in as state auditor as kind of a showcase position because he'll give him more name ID, and then in a year we'll run him against, right after he gets this auditor position, he's not going to do anything. It's a do-nothing position. We'll just run him for Senate, and he's going to be the guy that we're going to coalesce behind, and we're going to make him the chosen one to take down Rand Paul and out-young Rand Paul. And this was all gamed out, mapped out. I mean, totally. Like Irvine in California is a planned community. This was a planned Democratic operation. Take this guy. He's the best and the brightest of Democratic politics in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. We're going to basically shoehorn him into this auditor position, show that he can win a statewide race, feed him some money, give him this platform.
Yeah.
Perfect platform to launch into a Senate campaign, take down Rand Paul, who's vulnerable because nobody likes him. That's what was going to happen, except he lost to somebody not even the Republicans knew, named Mike Harmon. And I say that kiddingly. Obviously the party knew who he was, but nobody knew who the hell he was. What happened is Obamacare was so unpopular and Connect was so unpopular in Kentucky, and they wanted to change. By and large, the Democratic Party didn't come out and vote, and the Republicans sure as hell did. And if you had a D next to your name, pretty much, almost without exception, maybe one or two little exceptions, you got booted. If you had an R next to your name, well, you know what? I don't know who you are, but I like you. I'll give you a shot. And Harmon beat Elllen. So now the guy that was going to have the gift wrap platform to launch the Senate campaign from All he had to do was win a shoe-in election, and a funny thing happened. He didn't win. He lost. So now what you have is Rand Paul's like, so why do I need to get out again? Who's my opponent now exactly? Oh, wait, I don't technically have one.
Yeah, I'll tell you who it's going to be, though.
I understand. I'm just saying.
You know who it's going to be, right?
No, Allison Lundgren Grimes.
Absolutely, it's going to be Allison Lundgren Grimes
because she's the only one left. She's the only one left to survive.
Right, she's the only one left standing, and she's tried it before. She'll get another shot at it against somebody who's not an incumbent. And I don't remember how badly she lost. I don't think it was horrible against.
Actually, McConnell beat her by almost double digits.
Yeah, but I mean, against McConnell, that's actually not bad, right? Against a guy who basically owns Kentucky's politics.
No, I get it. But the thing is, they have her number already.
Yeah. They know that they see her coming. So you still need a Rand Paul, I think, to run in that race, because I think
totally understand. But what I'm saying is his decision about whether to abandon the presidential campaign of I got to do this now and spend more time on the state level. I think he's bought a little bit of time.
Oh, you know who else they could get to run?
That's what I'm saying.
You know who else they could get to run? Ashley Judd. That's a great idea for them. They should run Ashley Judd.
Okay, now, Ed, do you honestly think that we're that lucky? Honestly, do you think we're that fortunate? I see. I don't. I keep envisioning the day when the party is lucky enough to have Joe Biden throw his hat in the ring. I keep thinking we're lucky enough, to have all sorts of fun scenarios to happen.
Right.
I don't think we're that lucky.
All right. Let's move on.
I think we're going to have to win on actual ground. So if there is a downside to Tuesday night, the downside is that I think we're going to have to suffer with the Rand Paul presidential campaign a smidge longer, because technically right now he doesn't have an opponent. Now, I agree with you. I think the most likely, because she's the only one left standing, is Allison Lundgren Grimes. But she technically hasn't even been sworn into this race yet, so it would be a little out of form for her to announce for Senate before she's even technically sworn in.
Well, this is true, and here's the problem:
as Secretary of State.
Yeah, she's going to have to do something fairly quick if she wants to do it, because
getting on the ballot and all that.
You got to get on the ballot. You got to build an organization. So so you're right about that, because the time frame is short for her to do that.
Right, and I don't know what the actual filing deadline is, but she's not going to. Even if she announces in late January after getting sworn in, she can't have more than 8 weeks from the time she would have to file to the time the primary would even have to happen. So it's got to. I mean,
Rand Paul's not going
to hard to get up to speed that quick.
Rand Paul's not going to stay in that much longer. I mean, he's got.
I don't think.
No, I don't think so either, because there's no point. He's not gaining any traction. He's
totally agree. But what I'm saying is his decision to get out. It's not costing him anything now. If he were to say, I'm getting out in the next couple of weeks because this guy just won down there and he's now gonna go at me hard and I got to defend this seat. You could see Rand Paul having to make that fish or cut bait decision sooner rather than later. Now he's bought himself a month and a half. Maybe. He doesn't have to do it right away.
Maybe. All right, let's. I do want to mention one really quick thing about Tuesday night that I think is actually more important than Kentucky. Kentucky was a lot of fun, but what was more
about the pot issue in Ohio, or which one are you talking about?
No, not the pot issue in Ohio.
Which was pretty. It was important that they that's a Netter Colorado after effect. I think a lot of the rest of the country is hopefully learning the example of Colorado.
Well, I think if it hadn't been for the monopoly aspect of this, where it was locked into 10 people who were going to be suppliers and that's it would have passed. So I don't think.
Do you think that was really that well understood?
Yes, because
these are Ohioans,
Yes, I'm talking about the Cincinnati Bengal voters, who are a little bit more adept than the Cleveland Brown voters.
Okay, I'm just
but
saying.
I mean, because the anti-monopoly statute that the legislature put on the ballot in response to the marijuana legalization referendum passed 52-48, so people were paying attention to it.
Okay.
So yes, I think if that same referendum goes on without the monopoly part of it, it passes.
Okay.
No, but I think the most important election was the hold in Virginia. This was a very interesting race. This is the state legislature. Now, nobody thought that the Democrats had a prayer of getting control of the lower house, the house, I forget what it's called. They're not called, it's not called the House. It's called something else. But the lower house.
Assembly or something.
Yeah. And I know this because I was there and I can't think of delegates, House of Delegates.
House of Delegates, that's right.
The delegates. But the state Senate, Republicans only had a 21-19 advantage in the state Senate, and Democrats thought they could.
And they smelled blood in the water. They
thought,
did. We've got all the counties around D.C.
Mike Bloomberg poured in $2.2 million on gun control issues. You had the SEIU, which wasn't as well reported, but pouring in a couple $1 million into these things too, into these races. A lot of people were dumping money in on the Democratic side, thinking they could pull off a cheap win and get Terry McAuliffe a little bit of leverage with the legislature, and it failed. They wasted their money. It turned out to be a wash. Now, the reason why it didn't get as much interest is because it turned out to be a wash. Republicans didn't pick up seats. They didn't lose any seats either. And I think it shows that the McAuliffe thing, because McAuliffe was stumping from one end of the state to the other. He was really trying to win the Senate for Democrats.
Now, I know this is kind of redundant because in Virginia, as soon as you are elected, you are instantly a lame duck because you only have one 4-year term by state statute or by state constitution. That's how Virginia works. But
for the governor, yes.
For the governor, but
yeah.
Terry McAuliffe, if he doesn't have enough juice to get that through, I mean, honestly, he's done, right? I mean, that's like supposed to be in this day and age. That's one of the things the Democrats are going to run on nationally is gun control. I mean, Hillary's talking about that left, right, and sideways, and that's supposed to be one of the big things. That and women's issues are going to be what the Democrats run on next fall.
Yep.
And it fell flat. It didn't work. It didn't resonate in Virginia.
And here's the thing: Virginia is going to be a key swing state. You go back and look at how Ed Gillespie nearly beat Mark Warner, very popular guy, by the way. Mark Warner was a popular guy, and he nearly beat him because Republicans did much better at getting out the vote and getting on the ground and going granular than they had in the past. And if Ed Gillespie had a little bit more resources, he might have been able to pull off the upset there. So this time, the Democrats got the resources, and they still couldn't budge the numbers in the state Senate. So the reason why I say this is important is because Republicans really do need to try to win Virginia in 2016. And I know a lot of people have been writing off Virginia. Well, it's all the federal contractors and federal employees. They'll never, especially in what they call NOVA, Northern Virginia.
Right.
It's just too hard to do that. And it's not too hard to do that. Republicans can win there, and they just have to put some effort into addressing the issues that Virginia voters have.
Especially right now, when Hillary Clinton, who is the presumptive nominee, is not showing that she is energizing the union vote. She's not energizing the black vote. She's not energizing the Latino vote anywhere near to the levels that Barack Obama was energizing them at this stage of his campaign.
Somebody should write a book about this.
Now, do I think that those different voting blocks are going to vote Democratic in 2016? Of course they are.
Of course they are. But it's a question of turnout. It's a question.
Now, if only
degree,
somebody
too.
could do some of the analytics and maybe break that down and do some projection forward. Now,
golly,
who could do that?
Golly, if only somebody had a book that was going to come out that would help out with that. And
when is that book coming out, by the way? When's it supposed to hit the street?
Well, we're still negotiating that. Right now, I'm telling people spring because we're trying to figure out where in the schedule it is.
Is the book in the proverbial can, or are we still writing it as we speak?
It's been in the can for about a month. I finished it up about a month ago. The manuscript acceptance was a month ago, I think exactly a month ago, if I'm not mistaken. And so now it's in production. And for those who don't know,
when do the galleys go out to the best friend and co-hosts of the Ed Morrissey show?
I'm going to guess probably sometime in December. I'm
Okay.
going to guess that because they have this. They have this. Actually, I'm having a
Because
meeting with them in a couple of
I'm
months, a couple
sure
of weeks.
that I will get one of the first copies.
You are
I'm
you are
of
on the
that
list.
I'm just not even. I don't even have to question that. I know I'm going to get one.
And by
Before.
the way, we can talk about what the book's title is. It's Going Red. I do have it. I can't show the cover quite yet because it's not quite there.
Can you just put a big red splotch on the screen?
Yeah, I could put a big red splotch on the screen, but it's called Going Red: The 2 Million Voters Who Will. Hang on for just a second. Now I have to look because they keep changing this. They keep changing this up on me. So, but I'm gonna pull this up and I'll tell you exactly what the title here is.
Are we doomed? No, we're not doomed at all. Do we have work to do? Oh, absolutely. Do we have work to do?
Most definitely, we are not doomed.
And we
don't have to be doomed.
disciplined, and we've got to be darn near perfect in our ground operation in a handful of swing states.
Yeah, it's okay. So I've got it now. It's Going Red: The 2 Million Voters Who Will Elect the Next President and How Conservatives Can Win Them.
Florida, Ohio, and Virginia. I can't even begin to tell you how important those three states
Florida,
are.
Ohio, Virginia,
Colorado,
North Carolina.
North Carolina.
It's a hold because we won it the last time around, but we barely held it the last time around.
Right.
Colorado, you're right. I'm throwing in
Colorado, Iowa.
I think Wisconsin's winnable. So look for some cheesehead stuff in the book. I mean, there are places that we are going to have to learn how to compete again. And in those places, if we can compete in those places, it will mean that we will compete well in lots of other places. And that's sort of the premise of the book.
If you can win Florida with the seniors there, with the Latinos that are in Florida, if you can win Florida and you can win in Ohio, you can win anywhere in the country. You got to win those two states.
Yeah. I think that you're right in the ballpark. But yes, I will have that analysis out, and yes, you and Hugh are going to be, I think, key members of the early galley release because I'm very interested in getting your feedback on this. But we're in the middle of doing production. We're working through some other issues. I'm going to be going into a publicity meeting in a couple of weeks, and over the phone because I don't live in New York City,
right.
And we'll be discussing how we're going to roll things out. So there'll be more coming along these lines. I will tell you this: by CPAC, we will have a complete publicity campaign ready to roll. So, and by CPAC, you guys will have already seen this stuff. You will already know what I'm talking about by that point.
Very good.
So there you go. All right. So quickly, because I wanted to ask you about this, Jeb Bush. Now I know that you guys talk to everybody.
Yes.
And I have a lot of respect for Jeb Bush. I do. I have made it very clear from the beginning that I thought it was a mistake that he got into this race because I don't think he was. I think his time has passed, and I think that the Bush name is a liability.
I don't think he knew preemptively, and I don't think it was safe to say we knew it was a mistake for him to get in the race. I mean,
well, I did.
Well, okay. No, I get that on one level because he misunderestimated the negative connotation of the last name Bush and how much Bush fatigue there was amongst Republican voters, let alone what the other side's going to do.
I mean, but also just because this is a guy who hasn't done an election in 13 years. Well, and you know what? It shows. It shows. He has not been very good at it.
What I think he did initially by getting in as early as he did and raising as much money as he did early on, which he did. I mean, you got to admit, for the first month.
Oh yeah, he raised tons of money.
He raised tons of money, and he was risking locking out the rest of the field and freezing other people from getting in, which I think he calculated or counted on, because he had sewn up pretty much all of the big money donors. Yeah. At least early on. And he was trying to create the air of inevitability that he was going to be the nominee. And so I think what his play was is I'm going to overcome the last name fatigue by getting in early. And if I can show that I just raised more money than Godkin raised in a 6-week period, all these other clowns that are talking about hinting about getting in, they're not going to get in because there's not enough money left to go around, and it's going to be a 2-3 person field, and I'll kill everybody. That's what he played. What he didn't count on was that there's 15 other people that said, the hell with that, I'm getting in anyway. And he can't compete in a big field. I think he could compete better if it was a 2-3 person field. I don't think they had ever any strategy outside of trying to box him out early, how to deal with a 16 person field. He just that was never part of the equation.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's very clear that he wasn't gaining traction for the last several months. It's now extremely clear, right? And
now it's actually looking pathetic and desperate.
It really is. I mean, so is the mudslinging.
I esteem Bush highly. I don't think he was a bad governor at all. I
think he was a good
he's
governor.
Actually much more conservative than what he's giving credit for.
I agree with you totally.
I have no personal animus towards Jeb Bush. That said, the biggest stat that I've seen or the most telling statistic that I've seen is why he's even not doing well in his home state of Florida in polling is because
I think he's just been gone too long. And Rick
he's
Scott
been gone long enough that people that voted for him robustly, many of them are no longer here. And I mean they haven't moved to a different state. I mean they've moved to a different state of being.
It's an older state is what you're saying. It's an older electorate is what you're saying here.
It's an older electorate, and quite honestly, he's lost a lot of his voting bloc by natural attrition. Most of his voting bloc would only vote if they happen to be buried in Chicago, if you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean, and they wouldn't be voting Republican. So there you go. That might be part of the problem.
In that sense. So a lot of his vote quite literally has died off. Now,
that gets back to my original criticism of this, is that he is, he's not an old guy, but he is a politician of a previous generation. And frankly, Republicans need to be focusing on the next generation. And there were other governors in the race who could have done that. Now, Walker didn't succeed, and Bobby Jindal never achieved liftoff. And frankly, the mood of the electorate is sort of dispensed with governors are looking for outsiders.
Here's what it boils down to. And I did this experiment on the after show one night, and I thought it was really fascinating. If you ask anybody in the base, if you ask anybody where they're coming from, of the 15 or 16, 17 people, whatever's left, 15 people that are left, narrow it down, will it down to the top 6 that are going to be the final 6. Now, it doesn't mean who your favorite 6 are. Objectively looking at the field, who are the 6 most likely to have a shot at being president. And then we'll go down from there. Who's your final 6? Who's your 6-pack that are going to be the final 6 standing?
And the
my
Republican
guess is it'll be very close to mine.
Okay, mine's Donald Trump, Ben Carson, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, possibly Chris Christie, although he's fading off the screen here pretty badly too.
I'm just saying final 6.
And Carly Fiorina, maybe.
That's exactly my 6. I promise, I swear to God, you can go back and look at the after show tapes. My final 6 that's who's going to be in the final 6. I'm not saying they're all proportionally got the even amount of chance, but that's going to be in the final 6. Everybody else, God love them, they're fighting for cabinet positions or otherwise.
They should go home.
They should go home and make this easier.
Yes.
And almost anybody you ask, whether they're the populist phase or defense hawks or social conservatives, the religious right, evangelical right, it doesn't matter where you're coming from. If you ask them objectively, take who your favorite is out, but just objectively, who are the final 6 that are the most likely? Almost invariably, everybody gets to that 6. Now, the next step is whittle it down to 4. This is where everybody now diverges. Of the 6, who becomes the final 4?
Well, you just drop off Christie and Fiorina, as far as I'm concerned. That's your final 4: is Trump, Carson, Rubio.
I've seen people say that. I've seen people say that they think that Carson and Trump are going to finally run into reality, and they're going to fade before the other 2 are.
Yeah,
people
have been saying that
outside. I can make a case for that, but what I'm saying is the final 4 now it varies a little bit, but of the final 4. two of the names that stay in that Final Four, regardless of who the Final Four are Cruz and Rubio, right?
Yeah. Cruz and Rubio are in it to the end.
No matter who you are and what angle you're coming at, of the six we all agree on, to get it down to four, either Carly goes, Christie goes, Trump goes, or Carson goes, or a combination of them, and the other two stay. So now, who are the final two? As you look at the field today, if we had to whittle it down to two, who are the two most likely of the party today?
Well, you've got to go with the polling on this and say it's going to be Carson and Trump. And I know that's not the answer you want to hear, but the polling's been consistent. It's consistent across a broad number of pollsters. These guys have support. And here's the thing. I think you might get down to 4 by Iowa, possibly maybe get down to 4 realistic choices by the time Iowa rolls around. But you're not going to see Carson or Trump leave before Iowa, not with the numbers that they've got right now.
I don't think they're going to leave, but what I'm saying is, when it gets down to that level, do we think that Carson has seen his ceiling yet? It's
possible that we've seen Carson hit his ceiling. It's very possible that Trump seen
Trump hit his ceiling.
Very possible that we've seen that. If you take a look at the RCP arcs,
have we seen Cruz hit his ceiling?
I don't think Cruz or Rubio have hit their ceiling. I think it largely depends on everybody else. It largely depends on everybody else getting out of the way, and you're going to start to see some of that settle in.
You see, here's what I'm seeing. And I think I saw this. I don't know if this was your story or if this was I don't remember if it was you or Alla or which one did this, but there was a poll this week out of Florida. And of course, the Jeb Bush narrative of his, if it weren't for that pipsqueak upstart Marco Rubio that I used to love so much, but if he doesn't get out of the way and wait his turn, he doesn't understand that I'd be leading this field if he weren't in my way. And the polling actually in Florida does not show that.
No.
If you look at Florida right now, Trump is leading Florida at 26%. The next closest, or 27%, I'm sorry. Rubio's in second place at 16%, 11 points back. And then tied for fourth, I think, is Jeb Bush at 12%. So now what you have to do is ask the question, if Rubio were not in the race, then how do you reshuffle the deck? And this poll did show that. Trump, if Rubio were out of the race, Trump is now at 28%. He actually gains a point. And Jeb Bush, who you would think would get all of that Marco Rubio support and fold it into him, it doesn't. It goes into Cruz. Yeah. It goes a little bit into Carly. It goes 1 point into Trump. It splits. And actually, Jeb stays at about 12% in this poll, or 15%. He's like mired in mid-single digits. So he actually loses ground to Trump. If you reverse this aspect of the poll and you say, okay, now let's flip it and say that Jeb Bush is out, then what happens? Donald Trump stays at his ceiling of 27%, so he doesn't gain anything. Marco Rubio is now at 27, 28%, right there even, or maybe even a fraction more than Trump, because virtually every Jeb Bush voter doesn't go into Cruz; it goes into Rubio.
Yeah.
So the charge that the Bush camp is saying that Marco Rubio is his biggest impediment. That's why we have to attack him, because he's blocking us and he doesn't have a chance to win. If he were out, we'd be doing better. The exact opposite is true, according to the polling.
Yeah. No, I think Jeb Bush is living in denial, frankly, at this point. And
I think so too.
Now, Marco Rubio has, ever since that debate that he basically shut Jeb Bush down, that he won very broadly, by the way, in our own poll, the Hot Air Town Hall poll. Clearly won.
He does that kind of stuff best. One, because he's read up on it, he's studied it, and he's very good on his feet. He always has been very good on his feet.
But here's my question. Now he's coming under a lot more scrutiny.
Sure.
Donald Trump went after him on the credit card issue, which, by the way, and I know people, I happen to like Marco Rubio. I like a few people in this field, but I do happen to like Marco Rubio. And while I think it was kind of a dumb idea to use the Republican Party of Florida's American Express card, which was supposed to be for, I have a business card I have a business credit card from Salem because I travel and Salem covers my travel costs when I'm doing it for, for company business. And I have a credit card and I can use that credit card for personal expenses if I need to, but I just pay that part of the bill myself. Now that's what Marco Rubio did with his,
we all do,
with his RPOF American Express card. And this is not unusual. People who have company cards know this process. And, a company tells you, if you can avoid it, don't do it because it's a big pain in the butt to deal with it.
Don't do it. But if it's an emergency and you need it, it's there.
Right. The Republican Party of Florida did not pay that part of the bill. They weren't paying Marco Rubio's personal expenses. He was paying that part of the bill himself, and the RPOF was covering the official expenses.
Right.
Now, it's a dumb thing to do, politically speaking, and Rubio's acknowledged that, but nobody lost any money in this thing. Marco Rubio paid his own bills. And I think he's providing some pretty good answers on that. But I also think it's a legit nit to pick. I don't think it's a disaster the way that Trump characterizes it, but it's a legit area of criticism.
Maybe what Marco should have done instead is maybe he should have invested in cattle futures because he would have made a lot more money early on if he would have just employed the Hillary Clinton model and done some private investing with some key advisors that just happen to.
This is what I'm getting at, right? Is that the next thing he gets attacked on is the fact that he cracked into his retirement account because he wants to pay for his kids' private tuition. Okay,
that awful, evil, capitalistic bastard.
But
how dare he?
Here's what I'm getting at: is that Donald Trump and Jeb Bush to some extent, although I think Jeb Bush is probably going to start laying off of this because it's not working out for him, has been laying into Rubio over these things, over the types of things that many middle-class people
have to do to survive in this atrocious economy.
Many middle-class Americans do these things. They have one credit card. It's the company card. They pay off their part of it. The company pays off the other part. They want to get a better education for their kids, so they open up the retirement account so they can afford it. Those are the types of things that make Rubio somewhat more relatable than, say, a multi-billionaire guy who's
already got a wonderful story to tell personally, as far as the Cuba, the parents, the migration, and the story he's told. Working, his parents working as a bartender to make ends meet. He's got a wonderful story to tell, and he's actually had to live the life that virtually everybody in the party is now saying Washington doesn't get. They don't understand because they've never had to deal. Donald Trump, God love him, he had to actually he had to take out a small loan of $1 million from his dad to get going. A small loan of $1 million.
Yeah. Small loan. Well, okay.
Loans.
I don't begrudge him that either, right? And
I don't. But again, if the charge from the base right now, if I'm understanding what the base is largely saying, and that's why Carson's up, that's why Fiorina's had a little bit of a bump and fallen back a little bit, but why Trump is so popular is because they're outsiders. They're not part of the DC establishment. They're not part of the old boys club. They're not the ones that have a different set of laws for them and a different set of laws for everybody else, and they have no idea what happens in Washington. It's a bunch of elitists. They're separated from the problems of the rest of the country. They could never possibly understand what everyday Americans have to go through, and the tax burdens and the regulatory burdens and the economic hardship that this administration foists upon all of us. They just don't understand who we are. And here's Marco Rubio, who actually lived his life and actually had to make the hard decisions that you and I have to make, or the rest of us in the country have to make. And it's not always the best of decisions you can make, but it's the least worse at the time based upon the circumstances that you have. And these are the kinds of things he's doing, saying, okay, I get it. I've lived it. I don't want to have all of us have to do that anymore. Here's what I would do different. Versus somebody who says, yeah, Lovey, I had to take out a small loan for $1 million to start my first multi-billion-dollar company.
Well, and again, I don't begrudge the dead.
I don't either. But if you're talking about relatability, if you're talking about to the Republican base,
what about the 4 bankruptcies? When Trump started hammering on this, it came out in a tweet in the Hill,
Right.
and he's hammering on Rubio's credit card thing, and I retweeted it with a message that says the guy who's got 4 bankruptcies, and people got really pissed off at me. Because those were business bankruptcies. They weren't personal bankruptcies.
And I don't begrudge Trump for doing that because the way the laws are written at the time.
Sure, I'm not accusing him of doing anything illegal, but
it was the smartest business move to make at the time.
But at the same time, how many investors got hurt by Marco Rubio paying off his,
exactly zero. Exactly.
How many investors got hurt with Donald Trump declaring 4 bankruptcies for his casinos?
Countless.
So I'm sorry, but if he's going to be hammering on a credit card thing that didn't hurt anybody and Marco Rubio was actually paying himself anyway, then I think that the 4 bankruptcies matter, especially since the guy's entire argument is, I am super competent. I can do all these things. I can do them great. I can build things. I can build them great, which is true. He's done some very, very, very interesting things in business, but the bankruptcies are part of that. And so if somebody's going to hammer on Rubio for the credit card thing, Donald Trump is really the last person who should be talking about it.
Yeah.
Is my point.
But he does make a great interview.
He does, and he's coming up tonight on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
He is actually going to start. He's actually starting the show tonight. Now, Hugh started out by asking him about his upcoming appearance on Saturday Night Live, which is fine. It's kind of... Actually,
I think it's great. I think Trump's handling it brilliantly. It's an absolutely brilliant move on his part.
If you've got the chance to do it, you do it in
Absolutely.
a second. Of course you do. So nothing wrong with that. Then we start drifting into the world of defense, and I don't want to tease. I'm going to tease you just because it's a nice radio trick to do. Apologies for doing the tease, but what I really, really, really encourage you to do is listen very closely to the last question that Hugh asked him about financing and affordability of things like the new B3. You know that Northrop Grumman got this contract. We didn't even talk about this.
Right.
Northrop Grumman got a contract from the Pentagon to build 20 of these new B3 bombers that they haven't even built yet, right? I mean, this is just a prototype or a sketch of a new long-range bomber, the next generation of the B-2 stealth bomber, right?
Right.
Okay. They're going to build 20 of these things. It's going to cost, I don't know how many tens of billions of dollars each. It's going to cost a lot of money. But it's part of the nuclear triad, right? You want to be able to have, sea-based, land-based, and air-based nuclear capability, right? I mean, that's part of the nuclear triad, right? We're all agreed on that?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So now we get to the economics of said things. What I want you to do is when you hear Hugh ask the question, listen carefully to the question, and then listen to Donald Trump's answer. That's all I'm asking.
That's all you're asking.
And then I want you to either tweet me or email me or talk to me in the after show if you're a subscriber. And then let's talk about it and ask yourself if you heard the same thing I heard. I just that's all that I don't want to tease it anymore. I don't want to say any more than that. Just listen to that part of listen to the whole thing because it's Donald Trump and it's entertaining as hell. But listen to the tail end of it and ask yourself if you heard what I heard.
Okay.
How's that for a tease?
It's the last question that Hugh asks Donald Trump. Is that the?
It's not a gotcha.
Okay.
It's not one where they ended. Hugh, you're a loser, and hang up on him. No, nothing of the sort. It was a pleasant conversation. It ended just as pleasantly as it started. I just want you to tell me if you heard the same thing and had the same moment that I had.
All right. Okay. Well, this is an interesting tease. That's a great tease. That's an interesting tease. Now we're really looking forward to this. So you got Donald Trump coming up, and I'm sorry, who else do you have coming up here tonight?
Mark Stein, Sahil Kapoor, who's the political reporter for Bloomberg Politics, David Drucker, John Dickerson, the host of Face the Nation, our friend Robert Costa of the Washington Post, Lilacs will be along, and Alex Griswold over at Mediaite will be along.
Oh, really? That's interesting. Okay, Alex Griswold. I just read something that he wrote the other day now, and I can't remember what it was about. But yeah, I like reading Alex. He's a fine writer over there at Mediaite.
Yep. So all that is straight ahead, plus the afterwebs on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
And of course, you can be watching the show live at the Universe, HUGHNIVERSE.com, the troll-free web surfing experience for Hugh Hewitt fans. I'm a member. Duane's a member. You should be a member too. That way you can watch while Hugh is breaking out into cold sweat during the last hour of the show, because the Cleveland Browns are playing the Cincinnati Bengals tonight on Thursday Night Football.
I think,
and Johnny Manziel's starting for the Browns.
I think pretty much Hugh has already resigned himself that it's going to be next year is the year of the Browns. I think he's already reached that point.
Well, that's okay, because the Steelers aren't doing all that much better this year thanks to injuries, but yeah, it should be an interesting. You see, he's going to miss the whole interesting part of the show, because after the first quarter, this thing's going to be a blowout. But at least for the first quarter, you know what? Maybe I'll call in late and I'll give him an update on the game. Maybe I'll just do that.
Buyer beware.
Oh, I know. Probably by that point in time, Cleveland will be up anyway, and I won't want to call. But
that's true.
But if you're not a member of the Universe, Duane, people can listen to the show on their AM radio band. What should they do if they can't find the show on their AM radio band?
Well, I think they go into the general manager's office and they say, look, I know that you have an expense account and you probably paid for a sack of groceries off of that, and that shouldn't be done. We're going to expose you.
It's a disaster.
It's a disaster.
So we're going to expose you. So put the Hugh Hewitt show on. But look, if you can't find it that way and it doesn't work out, you can just say, you look around for the guy with the luxury speedboat. Oh, wait a minute. No, it's just a small cabin cruiser. That won't work either.
So if that's how the game's played, that's how the game's played.
It's a luxury speedboat.
The way I see this is Rubio and Cruz, to me, are in the two most enviable positions right now.
I agree.
And that is because Cruz seems to have the best money game right now going on and the best ground game in the early states. Cruz is going to do really well in Iowa.
He's going to do great in Iowa, yeah.
He's maybe not as much in New Hampshire, but he could very well win South Carolina and win Nevada, and he could actually win 2, maybe 3 of the first 4. And all of a sudden, you start establishing a narrative early on very quickly. Cruz is in a good spot. Rubio's in a spot that he may not be everybody's first choice, but he's almost everybody's second choice. Yep. And as everybody starts falling away, they fold into Rubio's support, and all of a sudden you look at, if 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people start to bail out, all of a sudden you look at Rubio and he comes out of nowhere and he's got a coalition. I mean, the two of them to me are, if we're running a marathon, you don't look at the two people that are out front in the second mile of a 26-mile race. You look at the people that are, they're building strong, and they're running solid. They're running solid. 5.5 minute miles or whatever they are, and they're coming. By the time they get to the 25th mile, they're going to be there. I think that's Cruz and Rubio.
Speaking of the 25th mile, this is the second week in a row that Duane's told me he's got to be out at 35 minutes, and I've kept him for the entire hour. Snookered him once again. So Duane, Generalissimo Patterson, thank you very much for being with us the entire first hour of the Ed Morrissey Show. And have a great show. You guys got a show coming up in an hour.
First to tell you that next week I'm only here for 30 minutes.
There you go. Okay. Next week it will only be 30 minutes for Duane. So we will try to stick to that. Duane, thanks again.
Yeah. That's going to happen. Losing the football again. See you guys.
See you later. Duane Generalissimo Patterson has been my co-pilot, my partner in crime. We're going to be calling Sue Ellen Browder right now, so give me just a moment while I pull up the phone number for this. Sue Ellen Browder wrote a book called Subverted. Subverted is the story of how I helped the sexual revolution hijack the women's movement, out by Ignatius Press. This actually came out a little bit ago. It's been out for a little while, but last couple of months, I believe. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I take it back. This one just came out. I'm thinking of the book from John Thavis. This one actually just came out, I think, last week. And so it's a memoir of Sue Ellen Browder's work in the women's movement and how she ended up converting to Catholicism and disavowing some of the work that she had done in that. She was a reporter for Cosmopolitan, so we'll get a lot of insight, I think, into what's typically called second wave feminism of the 1960s and 1970s. We're going to get her
Hello?
on. Hello, this is Ed Morrissey. Am I speaking with Sue Ellen Browder?
Yes. Hi, Ed.
Hi, we are on the air. I am my own producer, Sue Ellen, so I apologize.
Oh, okay.
I make my own phone calls, and I get my own coffee and that sort of thing.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, I just got a cup of coffee, so we're okay.
Excellent. Excellent. I highly recommend that. It's a great idea to have a cup of coffee. And Sue Ellen Browder, of course, as I was just mentioning, is the author of Subverted, How I Helped the Sexual Revolution Hijack the Women's Movement. I'm showing the book cover here on the screen.
Okay.
Sue Ellen, fascinating topic. Tell us a little bit about where you were at in the 1960s as what we call second wave feminism really began to rise up.
That's right. Well, I went to New York City in 1970, and shortly after that, I got a job at Cosmopolitan magazine. I had trained as a reporter at the University of Missouri School of Journalism. I had a good journalism background, but I was a small-town girl from Iowa, and I was very glamour-struck, and I wanted to work for Cosmo. It was the hottest women's magazine in the nation. And so I went there, and there was something I noticed at that time that has now been forgotten. And that was that the sexual revolution, which was what Cosmo was all about, and the women's movement, which was fighting for freedom for women in education and the workforce, were two distinctly separate movements. Betty Friedan called Cosmo quite obscene and quite horrible. And Helen Gurley Brown would have loved to have been part of the women's movement, but she wasn't. The sexual revolution was considered obscene and horrible. And so how did those two get joined together? That's the backstory in this book. The front story is a love story, my whole life with my beloved husband Walter, and all the fun we had, and all the drama, and all the non-fun, and everything that goes into a 40-year marriage.
Well, sure, of course. And I mean, I've skimmed the book. I admit that I have not had a chance to read it yet, but it is definitely at the top of my pile for books to catch up on. I just got done writing a book, and so now I actually have time to read books again. But I did run across the part where you're in Connecticut, and you're pregnant, you're about to give birth, and riots are breaking out all over the place in Hartford, Connecticut.
Right, that's the way it was in the 1960s. Yes, I gave birth that was actually 1970. I gave birth during a race riot in Hartford.
Yeah, I mean those are the types of things that, I mean, when I was growing up, those were the types of things that were going on. I was in, Los Angeles. I was growing up in Southern California,
Right.
and there was all this type of drama going on. And I was a little young for the Watts riots, but there were other things that were going on in Southern California in the 1970s. You're getting into a lot of these protest movements, the Symbionese Liberation Army, those types of things. A lot of violence still kind of coming in towards the end of the Vietnam War, spilling out into the streets and that sort of thing. So it's a very interesting. It's an interesting read to go back to that. It's also interesting because there's some parallels to, unfortunately, the last couple of years here in the United States, where you're starting to see some of these same things pop up again.
Right.
I mean, do you see the parallels there, and what do you think about that?
Well, we haven't resolved a lot of those things we were fighting over then.
That's true.
They're still buried, and that's one of the things that's in this story. I want to go, just because I'm going to be talking in the future about the political significance of this story, because people are beginning to pick up on this. And the political significance of the backstory in this book, Subverted, is that these revelations could reframe the whole abortion debate in this nation.
Yes.
Okay? The HHS mandate and so many battles we're fighting over abortion today spring from this confusion between the sexual revolution and the women's movement, which was born one night on November 18th, 1967, in the Chinese room of the Mayflower Hotel in Washington, D.C. That's when these two once radically separate movements were falsely joined together behind the scenes and it was under the influence of two men whose greatest ambition was to make abortion legal. This love story and the birth and the race riots and all these things that were going on, 60s, 70s, 80s. People get to live through that with me because this is my personal story, and people immediately say, like you did, well that's where I was, and that's what I did. But behind this, there's this deception that we didn't know about, that you get to see how that began to play into your life and what that did to you when you thought that this women's movement and this sexual revolution were one and the same, which they were not.
So tell us how that. I mean, I don't want to get too far into this because I want people to buy the book, right? I've got it up on the screen,
right,
folks, and the links are in the show post. You can go buy the book either from Ignatius Press's website or from Amazon, either one. And Amazon has a Kindle link if you're inclined to read this on Amazon. But how exactly did that happen? Because I'm with you that these really are two separate movements. One of which was for the liberation of women from being seen as, frankly, objects or chattel, right? And the other one, which basically turned them into objects and chattel.
Right. They were conflicting. Ideas. Well, what happened was as we all know, the National Organization for Women drew up a Bill of Rights, and this was their political platform for the next year, and that was done in 1967 in that Chinese room. Betty Friedan, who said she was not for abortion, when she wrote The Feminine Mystique, which launched the 1960s women's movement, she didn't even mention abortion or contraception. But Larry Lader, this man who founded NARAL, he was a co-founder of NARAL with Dr. Bernard Nathanson, whom you've probably heard of.
I have.
Yeah. So these two men together worked to convince Betty Friedan to insert abortion into the women's movement. And Larry said that to tamper with abortion meant the whole system of sexual morality in our nation could come tumbling down. And he was right.
He was right about that. I mean, some would argue that the pill started that, right? Because the pill, at least somewhat divorced sex from conception.
Yes, exactly. Certainly there were lots of things hitting at the same time.
Yeah,
and it wasn't just this one thing. But today what we're still fighting over, so that night in the Chinese room, Betty decides she's going to insert abortion in the women's movement. There are 8 rights that they vote on that night. Only 2 of them create an uproar. One of them is the Equal Rights Amendment, which we've now defeated and is long gone. But the other right was right number 8, and that was the right to abortion. National Organization for Women voted to repeal all abortion laws that night. And guess how many people were in that room? Only about 100.
Oh.
And only 57 people in that room voted for abortion, and 1/3 of these extremely liberated feminists, the founders of NOW, 1/3 of the people in that room walked out of NOW and later resigned over the abortion vote.
That's interesting to say. I had not heard that before.
I know, nobody knows that. This is all. I worked 4 years on this. It took me a long time to even find. I finally found the minutes of that meeting, and I got into NOW's papers in the Schlesinger Library. They let me in. They gave me permission.
Wow.
Because I'm an old Cosmo girl, I guess. but they let me in, and so I got resignation letters that people wrote to NOW over it, where they described what happened in that meeting. I got stuff that nobody has ever reported before, and it's all in this book. And so it's people need to. I think the beauty of this story is that it is my story. It's a personal story, so people can step into it. It's not just a history lesson, but people can step into it. They can enjoy the story, and there's something about a story that is very healing. You can be part of it. You can live it with us, And then you can also live that historic moment. We've got that meeting in the Chinese room of the Mayflower Hotel. We call it a fly on the wall of the Chinese room. And you, the reader, and I go into that meeting, and and I said, there's no journalists here. There's only one. The only journalist here is a fly on the wall.
Wow.
And we sit there as two flies on the wall and talk to each other.
That's nice.
You and the reader and I say, well, what was that all about? I don't know. That's very strange. That I didn't know how to get my story into that room where I was not there. But so that was what I did, and I think it was kind of fun.
Well, Sue Ellen, another thing that you talk about in this is I don't know if you call it a conversion story, but your Catholic faith and how that developed throughout these decades. As a Cosmo girl, as you put it, you don't generally tend to think of people coming out of that world into necessarily a devout Catholicism.
Right, right. Yeah, that was Ignatius's interest. They wanted to hear that story.
I imagine Ignatius wanted to hear that. Yeah, I imagine that's what Ignatius wanted to hear too, or at least
did.
So give us a little thumbnail of that. How did that come about?
Well, now you have to remember that first of all, I came from a small town in Iowa. I was baptized. I was a Protestant. I didn't buy completely into the whole sex and the single girl mentality, because by the time I was working at Cosmo, I was happily married and already had a baby, and my family was the joy of my life. So Walter, my beloved husband, was much more spiritually advanced than I was. I was ready to lie to make some money at Cosmo. I was ready to basically do anything to further my ambitions in New York. Walter was a poet, a philosopher, a novelist who was never going to sell out. And he never did. And he really suffered for that, because his writing didn't. My writing sold very well because I was willing to do anything to sell it.
Right.
But he wanted to tell the truth, and so he struggled greatly. And so you've got that but Walter in this book, as he did in our lives, carries the spiritual wisdom of the book. So Walter is guiding me all through this book, even though I don't know it. And of course, God is leading us both.
Sure.
And we're not aware of how that's happening. And then Walter wanted to move to the Redwood Country, and I moved. We moved all over. We're always on the road. They're always on the road here, going there. And he wanted to move to the Redwood Country. By that point, we had gone back to the church. He was an Episcopalian, and so I was too. And the Episcopal Church in Northern California, in this little town that we went to, was really kind of, I would say, we'll just say, falling apart. It was not doing very well.
Okay.
And Walter said, why don't we become Catholics? And I'm like, and of course now my feminist backbone comes up. I'm not going to join that patriarchal old Catholic Church, right?
Yep. Okay.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
And so this was becoming a little bone of contention between us, and I says, I can't become a Catholic just because you want to. And he says, no, of course not. And so then I decided to look into some history, because I was not very, a journalist. My history is yesterday, right?
Right, yeah.
So I looked into the history, and Luther, why did my Protestant forebears break away from the Catholic Church? And Luther was, oh my goodness, he'd say things like, I wish women would repeat the Lord's Prayer before opening their mouths. And he says, take women from their housewifery and they are good for nothing. And
yeah, Luther was a complicated guy. He was a very complicated guy. Yeah.
And then I said, well, let's look at Henry VIII, because that's how the Episcopal Church began when Henry VIII broke away from England.
Indeed.
Well, of course, we know what happened with Henry VIII. He was divorcing and killing wives right and left because he wanted a male heir.
Right.
And Walter said, well, Henry VIII broke away from the Catholic Church because he didn't want a woman to rule England.
It's true.
I'm like, it was true. So I was like, okay, let's look into the Catholic Church. And we went to the Catholic Church, and I found the services absolutely beautiful. And we went to the priest was a Jewish convert to Catholicism.
Really interesting. Okay.
A wonderful, wonderful priest, just fiercely loyal to the magisterium, and a wonderful teacher. And the first thing that he told us is to get the catechism.
Oh yeah.
And when I opened that catechism, we got two, one for Walter and one for me. I started reading that. I couldn't put it down. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. This was all about love and truth and joy and forgiveness. This wasn't the nasty old Catholic Church I'd heard so much about. This is the most beautiful. This is the truth I've been searching for all my life.
Yeah,
I just fell instantly in love with it.
I forget which bishop or cardinal said this, but basically I'm going to paraphrase because I don't know the exact quote, but basically it went something like, if the Catholic Church was what people describe it to be, I wouldn't want to be part of it either.
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, you know the quote I'm talking about. I unfortunately I can't just pull it up from memory and have to look it up.
It was Fulton Sheen.
It was Fulton Sheen. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, and he said that there are not hardly anybody in the world who hates the Catholic Church for what she is. And this is really paraphrasing, but they hate what they think the Catholic Church is.
Right.
Millions hate what they think the Catholic Church is.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
and that was me. Even though I didn't really, on some level, I didn't think I hated the Catholic Church. I was quite indifferent to it. But then you can see there was that I didn't know that was there.
Well, and I think a lot of that is just cultural too. I grew up in the Catholic Church. I mean, it didn't stick the first time around, but I grew up in the Catholic Church, so I was comfortable with it. And I would always be a little mystified when people would say, "Well, the Catholic Church is this, and the Catholic Church is that." I'm like, no. I mean, even when I wasn't practicing, it was like, no. No, that's not. It's not what it is. Let me explain to you a little bit about what it is, but it's not that. That's not what it is. And I'd always get the same reaction. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, what?
Right.
Oh, yeah. Well, that makes sense. I mean, I wasn't looking to convert people, but just to explain what the Catholic Church actually is, rather than just what these sort of myths have become about it.
Oh, we're just so under attack in the culture. I finally, when we came into the Catholic Church, I gave up all my secular writing. My income plunged from like 70 or 80,000 down to 14,000 a year.
Really?
And I just gave it all up because I was doing a lot of women's magazine stuff, and I was doing a lot of health articles, and there was always this stress component. And I realized that all this stress that I had been suffering off and on in my life was spiritual. And you couldn't write in women's magazines. What you really need to do is go back and find Christ, and He will give you peace and joy. Well, that's not exact. That's the truth. That's the truth. But it's not. It doesn't sell on Madison Avenue.
Yeah, well, you talk about this a little bit early in the book. You talk about Abraham Maslow, for instance, and the idea that people are entirely self-sufficient and they don't need anything else but themselves, and that there's this self-actualization that people want to achieve. People who are truly self-actualized want to achieve for achievement's sake and that sort of thing. And I found that to be a very interesting piece. It gets back into Betty Friedan and some of the components of the feminist mystique, and so it's an important part of what you're writing about. But I mean that's sort of the 1960s, 1970s, and all the way up to today in a nutshell. Is that basically it's the I'm okay, you're okay, you are what you achieve sort of thing, and that there are no other components to a fully human life, which that is, I think, in part the explanation for this combination that took place in 1970 of the feminist movement and the sexual revolution. Is that it was that sort of idea that there's nothing broader than a person, than their physical being and what they achieve, and so when you come to that sort of conclusion, then it makes sense to have sex as a manipulation, because that's part of That's part of what you do is to achieve, right? I mean, you're feeding your materialist physical impulses, and since that's all there really is to a person, why not? Right?
You've hit a very important point there, Ed. That is one thing I actually didn't say in the book, but I know to be true. The only way that those two movements could join together behind the scenes was because they all had the same philosophy of personhood. A person is somebody who has this horizontal view of it is not connected to God. Betty was an atheist, so was Helen Gurley Brown. So there was that atheistic, there is no God running through both movements there. We're going to fix everything up on our own because here we are, and there's no God that's going to help us on this at all. Well, we're on our own. You're on your own, baby. And that's those two movements were able to join forces because they had both closed off the sky.
It's interesting because I actually did get that from the book. I read
this section. We should because that's right.
I think you do have that in there as part of the component of how these two things coalesced. I would highly recommend, by the way, that people read the whole book, but that particular section is particularly intriguing to me anyway, because I'm always looking for causes, right? Well, there had to be a cause. Either somebody just was greedy for something, or there was some decision that some philosophy that brought those two things together. And I think that's the philosophy. It's the materialist philosophy that says we're no more than the sum of our parts. And so therefore, to feed the sum of those parts, we can do pretty much anything that we need to do.
Right.
So,
no, you've hit it, because that underlying view of personhood is what we're still fighting over in this country today. And a good thing to ask yourself, if you want to figure out what is your there's two definitions of personhood, duking it out in this country. And the question to ask is, who do I belong to? Who do you belong to?
Right.
Do you say you belong to yourself? It's all about me. I do everything on my own. It's me. Or do you say I belong to God and by extension to others?
So, Ellen, I do want to ask you one other question. It came up out of our chat room. We have a chat room that's very active on this show. And we talk about 1960s, 1970s being second wave feminism. Now we're kind of experiencing what's referred to as third wave feminism. There's where it's sort of this demand that there be carve-outs, and it's different than what it was in the 1960s and the 1970s. I mean, even apart from the sexual revolution stuff, the women's movement in the 1960s and 1970s more or less demanded to be just given equal access to the system as men, right?
Education and workforce.
Education, workforce, absolutely, right? And I think there's a lot of value in that.
Yes,
what do you see? What do you see the women's movement at? Where do you see the women's movement at today? Is it?
Oh, I see it everywhere. You know where the women's movement is? In the pro-life. The pro-life movement is not this little movement off to one side. The pro-life movement is the women's movement of the 21st century.
That's an interesting perspective.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere. I'm going to be speaking at the March for Life in January, and I'm going to be speaking also to Students for Life of America. My speech at the March for Life at the is a keynote the night before at a dinner is going to be why the pro-life movement is the true women's movement.
That's interesting. So I imagine you know Lila Rose then.
I don't know her yet.
Oh,
I know of her, of course, but I haven't met her yet.
She is a lovely, lovely young woman, and I just a great warrior for the pro-life cause, and yeah, you're going to hit it off famously. I just know you're going to hit it off famously. But,
yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just so thrilled to be going and me, because I'm almost 70 years old, and so these young women are the future. The Students for Life of America. These are the future. These are the feminists of the 21st century, and the media have not picked up on that yet, but they're beginning to.
They are beginning.
They're beginning to. Every once in a while, some light begins to dawn in a reporter's eyes. They're ignoring this, and these women are marching in the streets. They're driving giant pink buses across the country fighting against Planned Parenthood. They're doing all this stuff, and what the thing we're fighting over is that one right that was falsely inserted into the women's movement in 1967, that abortion right. If they hadn't inserted that into the women's movement, we wouldn't have all this uproar today.
Well, Sue Ellen Browder,
that's interesting.
It's very interesting. It's been a delight speaking with you. The book is Subverted. Let me grab it one more time here. Subverted, How I Helped the Sexual Revolution Hijack the Women's Movement. You can get it now. It's out now on Ignatius Press. You can also get it through Amazon. There's a Kindle version of it. And she will be, I predict, all over the media here. Sue Ellen will be all over the media discussing this. It's a very provocative topic. And it's been a delight speaking to you about it. And good luck with your book.
Well, thank you so much, Ed. Thank you for having me on.
Have a good day.
Okay, you too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. Sue Ellen, great to have Sue Ellen on with us. I hope you enjoyed that. I also want to thank Duane for sticking around for the full hour. This is 2 weeks in a row. I mean, I was joking around about this, but it's the truth. Both times he's like, I can only do about 35 minutes. We got a lot of things going on, which is true. They got, it takes a lot of work to put on a 3-hour radio show. So I'm going to come back to that in just a moment too. But, and then both days we just keep talking and he just keeps sticking around. And I keep waiting for him to bail out. But we have such a great time talking with each other. It just, he can't help but stick around. That's the best part of that. It's once I have him in there, I know he won't be able to pull out. But at any rate, so I want to thank Duane because it was a lot of fun talking with Duane. Next week, I will actually be doing a 3-hour radio show on Monday. I'll be going on Relevant Radio, filling in for Drew Mariani, who will be out that day. So that is from 3 to 6 Eastern Time, 2 to 5 Central. That would be noon to 3 on the left coast on Relevant Radio. And if you don't have Relevant Radio in your area, you can listen to it online through the Relevant Radio app, or I think also on the Relevant Radio website, relevantradio.com. But you can download the Relevant Radio app to your tablet, your smartphone, whatever device that you've got, and you can listen to the live stream there too. So 3 hours on Relevant Radio on Monday, and then Tuesday and Thursday next week, same bat time, same bat channel. We'll be doing all the fun stuff there, and then just we're on track. I'm done writing the book, so I don't think I'm going to have to worry about doing any of the getting preempted on stuff, trying to finish things up or doing any other stuff. I wish I could tell you more about the book. I actually kind of told you most about the book. I'm sneaking this into the show. You guys are kind of getting a sneak peek of this because we're actually going to be doing some promotion with this once we get the galleys out and stuff like that. So you guys are kind of getting a sneak peek about what the book's about and all that kind of fun stuff. So Duane likes to talk. You can't stop the guy. Who would want to stop the guy? You can't hope to stop him. All you can do is hope to contain him. Use the NFL, use a football analogy there. All right. I want to thank the folks in the chat room as well. What? No more secret missions this year? No more secret missions this year. Next year, by the way, I should probably mention this too. When you go on a book tour, you're away from your home an awful lot. So there will be a space in the spring next time where we probably won't be getting a lot of these shows done, but I'll be making media appearances elsewhere and you'll see me. But there may be a gap in here where we're not doing too many Ed Morrissey shows in the spring of next year. So just bear that in mind and be patient. We'll see how that all rolls out. But yeah, lots of fun. All right, let's go ahead and thank the folks in the chat room. Let's see, we got Cranky T-Rex, of course, crankytrex.blogspot.com. Buzzpo.com is where he writes. He's at Cranky T-Rex on Twitter, and he's a lot of fun to follow on Twitter, so be sure to follow him if you're not already doing so. By the way, don't forget to put your own URLs up in the chat room because we're all about shameless blog promotion here at the Ed Morrissey Show. Let's go ahead and start playing a little walking music here as soon as I can figure out where my soundboard went. There we go. Let's see. There we go. Couldn't hear it at first. All right, who else has been in the chat room? Rick Nichols, the Hugh Crew cruise mate. Wolf, Jackson J back with us. Great to see you back in the chat room. Jen Sobieski, Jeff Dunitz from the lidblog.com. JeffDunitz.com takes you there too. He's at Yin with Lid on Twitter. And so you can check him out there. He's also doing work for MRC TV, so you can find him at the mrctv.org website, I believe. And he'll, he'll be too busy hobnobbing to talk to us. We get that's not true. All right. Juanito Cabron, Mr. Fastbucks, another one of the fabulous triples here. My sister's brother, Opachanga, Rick 2, TR4A, my cousin Mike. Hey, Mike, great to have you in the chat room as always. Wolf Genghis, welcome to the show, Wolf Genghis. Glad to have you here. Hope you come back. Via Paso at the Ancestral Morrissey Mance. And the first mate behind me, keeping me on the straight and narrow, and hopefully my voice will last this out here. All right, folks, don't forget, I'll be back on Monday on Relevant Radio, Monday, relevantradio.com, or a Relevant Radio station in your area mostly if you're in the Midwest or the eastern part of the U.S., 38 stations. But you can always listen on relevantradio.com or the Relevant Radio app. I'll be on Relevant Radio Monday, 3 to 6 Eastern Time, 2 to 5 Central, noon to 3 on the left coast. So be sure to catch us there. Tuesday, back here, the same bat time, same bat channel with Andrew Malcolm. 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Central, 1 on the left coast. So be sure to stay tuned, tune in the Drew Mariani Show, and don't miss a minute of the Ed Morrissey Show. We'll see you later, folks.